G'day, I'm Gus Wall and you're listening to the On the Road podcast with Lumpy.
You're listening to Australia's #1 ski racing podcast, On the Road, sponsored by Coldie's Tow Bars and Bull Bars, featuring Chelsea Stevens, Jack Coldrake, Mick Kelly, Dave Bishop, Tim Horbury and Wade Bennett. My name's Mick Lumpton, now let's head to the 10.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Welcome back to another edition of On the Road podcast. My name's Lumpy, and as usual, we have another gift pack to give away. We always give these gift packs away, but you ask what is actually in the gift pack. I can tell you right now, it's a $100 voucher from Savage Force, $80 voucher from Rubber Jungle and a t-shirt, Bullet Boats hat, Bad Lad bag and stickers, and an exclusive On the Road podcast subscriber t-shirt. Our last winner was John Braithwaite from Victoria. To enter this time, you need to listen to Mick Kelly's question. Then jump on our Facebook page, message the right answer through. All the answers go into a number generator and bingo, you could win. We also have hot tips from Zig, so stick around. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share our On the Rope podcast page. Okay, our next guest on the rope is Lester Fremantle. He's a stalwart of water ski racing with a career stretching from the early 70s to this day. He is somewhat of an enigma. Somewhat shy and private, he is fiercely competitive and committed to water ski racing. Bisho managed to pull off a minor miracle when he sat down with Lester and chatted about a career that has included all the elements of an epic story. We really hope you enjoy the tale of Lester Fremantle.
Well, my next guest on the On the Road podcast is a man that has been around and reinvented himself for many, many years in water ski racing. I don't think I've ever come across a more passionate guy in water ski racing, and he's done everything in terms of racing boats and getting around ski racing, but it's the great man, Mr. Lester Fremantle. Lester, good morning.
How are you, Dave? Nice to be here.
I'm fantastic, mate. I know you're a very private guy, and I really do appreciate you coming down and having a chat with me this morning because, look, I think the fans, people, I myself growing up throughout ski racing, I'd go down and I'd buy Powerboat magazine before the internet and I'd read about Lester Fremantle and Moonshot and, you've been around and you've done it all. So probably the first thing that I wanted to touch base with you was ski racing. I mean, where did it come from? Most of our people that we speak to grew up skiing at, insert lake or river X here. Was it the same for you?
It was basically, we used to camp at Dews Creek at Eildon. And then on a couple of occasions, we wondered when we were going skiing, what were all those noisy boats doing out and all making a big racket on the lake? And that was our first introduction to it, to just see it. And then we watched it a couple of times. They went from the Eildon Ski Club and used to race up and down the main arm of Eildon. So my first introduction, probably about 16 or 17, was at Eildon.
And you were a skier yourself?
Yeah, just a social skier. Not very good.
But I both.
Well, I used to like to drive the boats all the time. So I had a passion for the boats and skiing at Lake Eildon, probably starting at about 16 or 17.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's fine. You see the boats and the racing, you think that looks fantastic, but how do you go from that to actually getting into your own boat?
Well, we had social boats, 2 or 3, powered by 100 Evinrude outboard.
Beautiful. The big V4.
That's it.
Yep.
So we just started doing that, and then the more interest that I got in the racing, the first boat we bought as a race boat was a Skicraft Interceptor.
Yes.
Which had a 454 in it.
Yes.
And it was
Mongoose.
Purple, and it was called Mongoose.
There you go. I've done my research.
You have. So I bought that off a contact of Ron and Ray Craddock's from Skicraft. It was a second-hand boat. So we first probably started going to the races in the mid-70s, and that was just towing subbies and doing things like that.
Yep.
Towing, we towed Lenny's son a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yes, Lenny used to give us a hard time, so...
Is that because Lenny, you didn't want to ski behind Lenny?
He definitely didn't want to ski behind Lenny. So we first went up to Eildon for a couple of races and just dabbled around at the time and just sort of were in awe of all the other boats that were around at the time.
And I guess that's similar for all of us, isn't it? I mean, I know when I started out in 1993, which is a fair bit after you, but I remember rolling into Lake Cooper for the Nationals and looking at your boat, the Connolly, with the fluoro down the sides, which is probably the boat you had for the longest, I would reckon.
Yeah, we had that boat for about 22 years. We had that for a long time. It had various incarnations on the way through. We built it for the 1990 Worlds in Darwin, and it was in the fluoro there where we towed Ian Dipple.
Yes.
With Brendan observing to second place,
yes,
behind Paul Robbo with Firebird.
Yep.
Which we were very proud of, and to this day that's considered an achievement that we're proud of. So.
And the great Stefano Gregorio in third place.
Yes, he could have won every race, except they just went hard from the start, and that was behind a BPM, which was a V-driven boat, with an engine in it that looked like it was out of a tractor. But no, they had a lot of fun, and he was a brilliant skier, and they just were on it from the start, but... the Italians, they certainly enjoy their racing.
They do. They enjoy their partying afterwards as well.
Yeah, funny that, yeah.
Yes, Carlo Casa and Stefano Gregorio, big party animals for sure. And great skiers as well.
Oh, yeah. Look, we went up there with Ian. We just had our first child, Stephanie, and I said to Betty, oh, well, you better stay home and this, that and the other, and we'll just go out and do the racing. And I think I got no way. And so Stephanie was the team mascot at the 1990 Worlds. And every time we couldn't find Stephanie at 6 weeks of age, there'd be a Robbo of some description holding her going, isn't she cute? So the Robbos certainly looked after her.
That's fantastic, isn't it? I guess that's the ski racing family. And I've got questions here, Lester, but we tend to go off on different directions because, the whole Worlds thing comes up and I want to go, on about that Connolly and stuff. You did have some other boats, and we'll just go back a little bit. Prior to that, I mean, you did the whole V-drive thing for quite some time, but you're also very early in the whole stern drive deal as well, weren't you? I mean, you're one of the first guys to be into stern drives.
Well, what we did is we had, after the Interceptor, we had a Ramsey Puma with a 350, which was a good all-round boat, which was V-driven. And then, after that, in about 1979 or 80, we bought our first stern drive boat, which was Roger Connolly's old All-Torque.
Yes.
And it had a 6-litre engine with a Mercury package, and that was in about 1980, so it was early in the piece.
That's interesting you say the Mercury package, because... when I got into it, there was really not many boats getting around with a Merc package.
Well, they were the first of them with twin carby 350s. They were a 6-litre engine with a 2-drive package on it. So we bought the boat off Roger and then just prettied it up a bit the way we do and build our own trailers the way we do. And we went and raced that in the early stages. And the highlight for me of that was in 1980 at the Nationals at Wiseman's Ferry. I towed my best friend of many years, Greg McCormack. We've known each other since he was 4.
Yep. And
we ended up winning 6-litre at the Nationals.
Yep.
And to this day, I still tell him I carried him the whole way.
And you probably did. No, actually, I've seen some photos of that. There's some photos floating around on Facebook and the internet of that actual Nationals, and picture of you in your wetsuit shorts as well, standing up in the boat looking resplendent.
You need to delete them. But that was the 6-litre boat, which was a beautiful boat. And then we ended up selling that boat to Stan Najar.
Right.
And that became Moonshine,
Yes.
which Stan ran successfully in 6 litre for 2 or 3 years before he went on to buy Ian Tricker's Connolly, and that became Network.
Yes.
So we sold that boat to Stan. Then we built another Connolly, which we put a tunnel ram big block in.
Right.
And that had a 2 drive on it as well.
So that was a move up to 8 litre then?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And so we did that, and then we ran that for about a season with the tunnel ram engine in it.
Yep.
And that went well for us, but we had drive issues with that because the 2 drives were a bit fragile.
Yeah, you've got a lot more torque.
That's right. And so what happened after that is we actually did the reverse. Most people were going to the stern drive boats, and we'd gone to them early.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the fragility of the drives at that time.
Yep.
Because I think Dick Taylor rebuilt one for us, and then Ron Bell did.
Ronnie
and that's
Bell,
where I
great
first
man.
met Ron.
Yep.
And then I looked at the V-bottom Everinghams,
Yes.
which Bert, Bruce and Malcolm Everingham had built. They built the first one. John Catania with Assassin had gone to them with a 19.6 flat bottom and said, we need a V-bottom. So they put a V-bottom on the bottom of the flat bottom circuit race boat, and that's how the V-drive boat, that's how the V-bottom
really?
Everingham started.
So John Catania was the man.
Yeah. John went to them and said, right, this is what we need, and Bert fluffed around and said in the end, yes, as Bert did, and then they did it.
Yeah.
And so we got to the point of, I didn't like the reliability issues I was having, and I wanted to get a supercharged engine. So we basically went to the simplicity of the V-drive and the 20-foot Everingham. So we actually went backwards in terms of everybody was going that way.
Yep.
And we ended up doing that. Oh, that was about early 80s.
Yep.
And we ran that with just an engine for a short period of time down here. Then I went to Russell Jones.
Yes, great engine builder, Mr.
In
Russell
Sydney.
Jones, yeah.
I
A lot of sprint car stuff, I think
Yes,
Russell did, yeah.
and I looked at all the engines and who was finishing and who was winning.
Yep.
And in the inboards, they all seemed to have Russell Jones engines on it. So I went to Russell, and he built me an engine which we put in the Everingham, and we literally drove it from the boat ramp. After testing it at Windsor, I said to Russell, what do I look out for? He said, see that big light on the dash?
Oil pressure?
If that is oil pressure, if that comes on, turn it off.
Yeah.
What else have I got to look for? Make sure there's water coming out the exhaust pipes. And true to his word, we drove from Sydney to Yarrawonga for a 2-day meeting. And basically from that moment on, we've basically finished all the time, and that was the start of getting established in the winner's circle. That with David Tarry, Mick Kelly and Graham O'Brien observing, we started to become successful here on the Victorian scene, which went very well, and we won all the series and things down here. And then the following year, I got the opportunity to tow Jeff and John Hardacre in Sydney.
Yep.
So
this is great because I've got these questions here and you're just answering them for me, so keep going.
So
Fantastic.
we went to the Nationals in Perth.
Yep.
And towed the boys over there, and then we basically ran with them in Sydney from that time on.
Yep.
And did the point scores in Sydney and so on. So it was a transition from running here to running the point scores and things in Sydney.
Well, that's actually one of my questions. I want to maybe elaborate a little bit more on that. I mean, when I started ski racing, I thought you were from Sydney originally.
Yeah, that's still a common misconception, and I probably don't do anything to correct
to
it.
dispel it. tell me about that, and the fact that, I mean, who doesn't want to race on the Hawkesbury? Let's be honest, it's absolutely beautiful up there. Was that the conscious decision, or was it because you had the Hardacre brothers? Why?
The conscious decision was, from when I first started ski racing, I was always taken with the Hawkesbury River and the bridge to bridge.
Absolutely.
My obsession about ski racing is based on that race.
Yeah.
It still is. Even though I might not go every year, it's my favourite.
You've gone to the last question, was your favourite race and why? I kind of probably knew the answer.
Look, it's just a magnificent river, and you go in totally changing conditions.
Yeah.
You start at Dangar Island.
Yeah.
You have to temper what you're doing through to Bar Point and up past Spencer, and it's a long way.
It's a long way.
And so it just has so many elements to it, is one of the appeals of it.
Yeah, I agree. Being a Victorian, you're supposed to think the Southern 80 is the greatest race. I love the Southern 80, as we all do.
Yep.
My first river race was the Sydney Bridge to Bridge, and interestingly, just a quick one for you, and I know this is not a Dave Bisho interview, but Jeff Hardacre, I walked into Hardacre's Ski Mart in 1993, and Jeff was operating a ski shop at that time.
That's right.
And he said to me, Davo, you know how he speaks, Jeff?
Yeah.
He's a legend. I love Jeff. And he said, Davo, what we'll do is I'll take you down the river on the Thursday before the race, and I'll show you the lines. And, my first ever river race, Jeff Hardacre, the guy that I've read about, skiing behind you, takes me down the Hawkesbury River. I thought it'd be like a car racing buff jumping in with Peter Brock and doing a lap of Bathurst. Like, it was just phenomenal. So I totally get where you're coming from.
The era with Jeff and John and Ken and Reg and Shirl and Sue, it was a fantastic period. Yep. They were a hell of a lot of fun. Jeff would be, to this day, the most professional skier that I have been involved with. Before the days of GPSs and everything else, he had his watch on his wrist while he was racing. He knew exactly what he was about, and lines. They used to take me down there endlessly showing me the lines.
Yes.
Did
he make you turn around and make sure your wake was nice and straight?
Yes, we had to do all that.
Yep.
Although we used to have to stop at Brooklyn, I think we had to get another bottle of scotch for the trip back.
Haig, I think it was when I took
yes,
it.
But look, their passion, and they had spent many years with John Catania with the Assassin, and John decided to give it away, and that's when I came into the breach with them, and it was just a fantastic period. But it comes down to the old thing. Winners are grinners, and the rest can make their own arrangements, because at that stage we won more than we didn't. Yep. We won all the 4 major classics in 1 year, because there was only 4 at that stage, which was Southern 80, Bridge, Grafton and Mildura.
And back to back, 85, 86 for the Bridge to Bridge, but that 85 season must have been unreal to take the Southern 80 down as well.
Well, the season with the Southern 80, we actually won the Southern 80 with David Tarry and Mick Kelly.
Yep.
And Tassie, or David Tarry, not many people still know, we actually had a fall.
Really?
He lost his hand, he slipped out on one corner, so we lost time, and so we ended up doing it in 39 minutes, something or other, but it was good enough to win because of, I think, a few of the other people like Ted and Murray and all that, and Peter Waterhouse had probably had problems, so we managed to get home. So we won the Southern 80 with those guys and with Graham.
Yep.
And that was a delight.
Why not the Hardacre boys?
Oh, we hadn't actually, at that point of time, I'd just done the Nationals with the Hardacres, and we were going to do the following season starting with the boys.
Yes.
So it commenced from there. And Link and Tassie were fine with it all. So it sort of was circumstantial that we ended up doing it all in the 1 year, but with a different team.
You must have come across some unbelievable guys in those periods. Like, I think about the boats, the Mike Dominkses with the Thundernuts, Ted Hurley with Rolco, the Island Cooler with Dennis Rowbottom.
Yeah.
They must have been fun guys to race against and serious guys to race against. Networks, Dan AJ mentioned as well.
Look, on the Victorian scene, with Ted, with Rolco, which then Murray Price bought.
Yeah.
And Murray was very passionate about it as well. And then Ted went from that to Recovery. And Ted and Butch and, the whole family, I mean, their passion knows no bounds.
Yeah.
And then Dennis Rowbottom, with his commitment to it all, and the Nankervises that did all the work on that boat to make that the success that it was.
Yes.
They just micromanaged and did a lot of things with that. And then
a lot of the young people will be thinking Leo, but you're talking about Alan and Keith, of course.
Oh, Alan and Keith.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, Alan and Keith, and then Leo was just the young buck learning on the way through.
Alan's son, yeah.
Yeah, so they were passionate and did lots of 6-litre boats and 8-litre boats, and virtually Stevenses and Everinghams, they were all blueprinted by then. Everybody that was out of their stable, and Southern 80 was a big thing, obviously, for here. They, back then, were concentrating on handling and getting things to turn and do it all. So none of it's new.
Yeah.
It's just, you just worked with the technology that was available. And, people like Peter Waterhouse with locomotion, and the stern drive boats started to run down there, but with limited, success.
Yeah.
But, back in that time, with the Everinghams, mainly blown carby, because that was what was available to us.
That's what you had, and Nankervis were big on importing engines of that
Oh, look, I used to, for even back in the 70s, I'd be up there a lot on weekends looking at what was in next and bench racing with Keith, and Alan would be out in the workshop doing all the work.
Yeah.
In that context with Leo, and then the other sons got involved along the way.
Yep.
And Keith was just passionate with it all, and yes, it was certainly a central point down here for a lot of the technology.
Incredibly sad, really, wasn't it, what happened with, that workshop on Lake Epilot?
Yeah, look, we used to all be up there, even if we weren't customers all the time, using the boat ramp and doing that, and chatting with Keith and throwing the sticks for the dogs while we were standing there talking. So, because Lake Epilot was a magnificent venue, and we used to race from there a lot in those earlier years. The point there, it was a great place to race.
Yeah, well, I grew up at Epilot, I don't know if you know, but my mum and dad had a caravan. That was my go-to, that was my Eildon, and I used to roll into Nankervis, and I saw your boat there plenty of times, and just dribble and drool and talk to Alan and Keith. I probably annoyed the crap out of them, to be honest, but it was almost spiritual going there, wasn't it?
Yeah, and look, Mike Dominguez was with Nankervises for a long time, with Thundernuts and various boats that he had. So, look, there's been a lot of successful races, and in Victoria in particular, the Nankervis family's synonymous with that.
Who stands out in your mind? And you've bear in mind, we've gone from the 70s and you're still competing to this day, and we'll get to that a little bit later on, but in your mind, who stands out as sort of the hardest, most professional guy in terms of boat drivers, I guess we're talking about here? Can you narrow it down to one, or is there?
Look, I was quite happy running close to most of those people that I've mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And we all trusted racing each other. I think basically the probably two standouts through the whole period would be, and not that I was racing at the same level as them in latter years, because I wasn't, but Mark Cranny and Greg Houston would stand out as super professional in everything they've done with it all, and as racers, because they left no stone unturned. Don Gully similar, but as I said, I wasn't racing against them as much at the level they've been running at,
Yeah.
But they would be probably my two standouts.
And absolutely understandable. I mean, those guys, no love lost between those two boys, but that's what competitors do, isn't it? You know, I mean, there's F2 drivers out there that I don't get along with, and it's probably only because we're racing each other, but they did take the sport to another level.
Dave, there's especially when we were doing a lot of circuit racing stuff, you just know innately there's certain people you'd run tight with and others you'd give more room to because everybody's different and you just try and do it as best as you can do it. But they would be probably the two I would mention on the top of my head, and no doubt that'll cause trouble.
Well, if it causes trouble, it causes trouble, Lester. We're not here to fluff it up, are we, here on the Road?
And now the latest and hottest tips from one of the world's best in all things ski racing. It's over to Jason Walmsley, aka Ziggy.
So once you go ahead for a 2020 season, what should skiers be doing to prepare for that first race?
What I'd do is I'd have a look at your calendar, plan out your racing schedule. First big race generally for most of us is the Hawkesbury 120, which is one of the longest, most grueling races on the calendar. Training for that sort of race would be more predominantly looking at hand strength, leg strength, neck, those things that let you down. A lot of the time, your first race might be a Grand Prix style race, so you'd be looking at doing some longer runs, some hills and burpees and, heart rate training, try and get that intensity up. But yeah, look, generally just look at what you've got coming up and try and pick what your weakness will be for that particular race.
Mate, something you said to me before, and this is not on my question sheet, but it just sparked something in my mind. You are a student of the sport of water ski racing because you said to me a little bit earlier on, you mentioned Jacob Hinterholzel, who's a young guy who's driving a velocity boat. He's put a lot of time and effort in and he's done really well. I find it fascinating that, as a superclass competitor and a guy that's been around a long time, you're still reading the results and seeing what's going on.
Look, for whatever reason, it interests me. And I'm interested in what's going on with the younger skiers coming through and people with the boats and what's going on. So I still read and keep across and listen to what's happening with the people developing through the sport because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Even back in the 70s, it was family groups that would come in and work their way through just as they have done.
Yeah.
And it's just different things, and when they get different boats and things, and we all do things different ways, but, going to the Worlds and doing what they did and learning what you learn, that's what you're going to make mistakes. You just try and...
God, don't I know that?
Yeah,
lesson?
We all make... all you got to do is try and make, have things, just keep trying, and you'll make... Because people say to you, with some of the boats, you've got this to work and that to work and the other to work, and you go, well, you learn by making lots of mistakes.
Absolutely.
But you've got to learn from them.
Well, another interesting thing about yourself too, and I know we're not making this about you because you've told me very strictly that we're not allowed to make this about you, but you are on here and we're chatting, and it's just stuff that interests me. So if it interests me, it's probably going to interest the fans out there. But you've done things a little bit differently through your career, and I feel like that's because you've got a pretty inquisitive mind, and you probably don't look at convention and just think, because everybody else is doing that, that's what I should do. You do look outside the box. Would that be fair?
It's probably why I'm still doing the boats and doing it, because that's what's always appealed to me is technology and developments and learning, because our business background's engineering. Not that I know much, but I like all that side of things. So with boat developments, handling, as you well know, 5 boats out of the same mould can all be entirely different. So you must take them on their merits. When I mentioned earlier about the drives, with the Mercury stern drives, when we did go back in, like with the Connolly, with the one we kept the longest that we had for 20 odd years, we started with a 5 drive on that because they just released it in substitute as a 3 drive. So I went with the 5 drive.
And then the 6, sorry, I just pulled you up there, but I'm going to say, and I might be wrong, but I don't think I am, you're the first guy to do a 6 drive, aren't you?
Yeah, everybody said it'll be too heavy and this, that and the other.
Yeah, that only just popped into my head
well,
then,
that occurred because when the 5 drives first came out, I dealt with Ron Bell, who had a very close association with Anne Mercury, and we were found early on we were having gear troubles with them, fretting gears.
Yep.
So we were they weren't failing, but we were having to pull them apart.
Because you were checking them.
Yeah.
They would have been failing.
Yeah. So we worked with Mercury on that. This was around 1990, around the world time, around the Worlds. So we worked with Mercury, and then they did some gear upgrades and alterations, and then with Ron rebuilding them because he was always pristine with everything.
Yeah.
Some people would rebuild them like they were a Swatch watch, whereas Ron would rebuild them like they were a Swiss watch.
Yeah.
And if the preload wasn't right, he'd pull them apart and put them back together.
Yeah.
Anyway, once we did those gear changes with the 5 drives were fine. And they were quite light, the boats liked them, they handled well, and we had a good run with them, even with the bigger horsepower that we were putting in. But then at one stage, Mercury said we're going to obsolete them.
Yeah.
You won't be able to get parts anymore.
And they were getting very old.
Yeah. And so they were going to retire the product. So that's when I said, and discussed it with Malcolm Priest and with Ian Tricker, and went, let's put a 6 drive on it. And
did they all look at you like
yeah, they all looked at me like I was on something. And I said, I've worked it all out. The weights are this, that, and the other. They are heavier. It's on a 10-inch standoff box. It's further back. It's all of the above.
Yeah.
So. And we put it on
our super strong.
And we put it on our Connolly with about 1600 horsepower, and the hull weight, that Connolly weighed 270 kilos dry.
Wow.
For its whole life, that's what it weighed.
That's incredible.
So we put it on that, and we decided to see how it would perform because the 5 drives were getting obsoleted.
Yeah.
So I'd sold the 2 5 drives I had, and then we put the 6 drive on it, and I was in Melbourne, and I went, the weight might not be distributed correctly. Oh, well, we'll see. Well, I could fly up and drive it. No, I know. We'll put Guru in it. Guru can go out with Malcolm. Malcolm can stand on the back, and if it flips over backwards,
if he dies.
We know it's no good. And Guru will shake himself off and go, what'd you do that to me for?
Well, he'd fallen out of a few boats.
Yeah, I know. We'll put him up the bank, so that's okay. So anyway...
Ian Trigger, for those of you listening, if you don't know who the Guru is.
So it ran fine, and we then took it to, I think it was at Sackville for the hot shots for the bridge. So we had lots of inquisitive eyes, and there would have been, and I'm not even going to name some of them, but there would have been about 10 or 15 people high-end in the sport going, that's a waste of time, that's too heavy, that's not going to be any good.
Yep.
Well, within 6 months, they all had them.
Yeah, 100%.
So, look, it was a necessity. The 5 drive was good, but it was a necessity, and it does come at a weight disadvantage, but the durability of them, and as the boats have got bigger and bigger, it's all balanced back out again.
Yeah, and then into the Mercury packages, which
that's correct.
That next step, which they came with as well. Mate, you've seen the highs of the sport. When I say the highs of the sport, I'm not just talking about wins. I'm talking about friendships, people.
It's places. Interaction with people.
It's what it's all about, really, at the end of the day. Because I don't know if you paid the house off from any of your wins.
I've told my wife for the last 40 years that the ski racing costs $50 a week.
Yep. Well done. I hope she's not listening to this podcast. And if you are, darling, it does cost $50 a week. Mate, but I did want to touch on, you did have quite a low light there, Southern 80, a couple of years ago. And we've spoken about this, and you're happy to talk about it, but tell me a little bit about Kevin Bartrick and what went on there.
Well, to this day, we're all devastated when we lost Vardy.
Yep.
He was a lovable rogue of the sport, friend to everybody.
He was. And
we'd skied him off and on, and with Jamie, and unfortunately the incident occurred at the Southern 80, and as I said, we're all devastated.
Yep.
And it doesn't go away, you still feel it, but you know, you think of Vardy and you think of Danny Cropper as a pair, and you know, going back to Syndicate with Ruddy, Southern 80 winning the hot shots and just being manic with it all. Then also the two of them with Ross Christensen or Fish with Top Gun. And did many years of that.
So, and running over in New Zealand.
Yes, well,
as well.
In the last couple of years, when I've skied the Jamison family from New Zealand, they were all well known to Vardy, because I think DC and Vardy in New Zealand, I'm sure there's a wanted board out for them over there. I think when they went over there, they never wanted to come back.
Sometimes, well, there was conjecture whether they were allowed to come back too. Actually, I reckon there's a plaque for those two guys over in New Zealand. I go over for the Bisho Ridge quite a bit.
No, look, that and the thing, everybody loved Vardy, and we're all just very sad about it. And I am most grateful for the unerring support I've had from Danny. All the way through, which means a lot to me.
Danny Cropper's a legend, always will be. Well, mate, we won't dwell on that too much, but he was a great man. It's great to see that you're still up and racing, because, like, at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure Vardy would be going, Lester, get in your boat and go racing, son. As you could imagine, it was like that was it. But, you know, over time, and also with Danny's urgings, as I said, he's been a fantastic support, especially because he was his best mate, and so that has been invaluable. And that got us to go, let's just puddle along and get back out there. And enjoy the sport for what it is.
That's right.
Absolutely. And big shout out to DC as well. He's been through a little bit of a health scare, but he's going all right, I think, now.
Yes, I think he's coming along pretty good. He's looking pretty fit.
He is looking very fit. He lost a few kilos.
Yeah, so he's still immersed in the sport with his kids and doing the stuff. So, we still remain in contact. So who knows what's in front of us.
Well, a bit of co-commentary with me he does as well. So I might have to carry him a little bit because he had the problem with the throat. But I'll carry him.
No, he's good. And when it comes to commentary, listening to you guys doing it is a lot of fun. It makes the sport a lot more colourful. And going back over the years, back in the 70s, in the Victorian races, we used to have Ron and Maureen Baker that used to do the commentaries. They had a boat called Shemaron, which was a 6-litre Haynes Hunter boat. They used to tow their daughter, which was the first race in the morning. And then Ron would take over the microphone with his co-commentator VB, and the commentary got better and better as the day went on. And so, but it was so colourful, and it was just, even though we're all serious competitors, and in New South Wales, after that, Norm Griffin of Louise J fame with his boat. Norm used to do the commentary all the time. Wasn't entirely accurate all the time, but none of that matters. So I do think it does make a big difference, and I know people are reluctant at times to come up when you want to interview them when they've just finished a race or done something, but it seriously makes, it just makes for a lot of fun.
Well, I think you need to be that conduit between the crowd and on the bank and the competitors, you know, and that's the way I've always looked at it. And I take it as some fun. I started at Lake Cooper commentating myself, and with Lisa Clancy, she's now Khan back in those days, but we just used to jump on the mic, but that turned into television and all sorts.
Well, you also asked me how I keep up with what's happening with the juniors and everything else. And part of it is listening when you guys are talking about it and what it is, because that gives you more information and what's going on.
Mate, that's much appreciated. We do it because we love it, same as you race because you love it. But we're sort of getting down into it. One thing I did want to touch base, being a boat driver myself, clearly after my world's effort, not a good one, but I did want to touch base with you on the difference. I've driven one V-drive boat in my life.
Right.
Scared the crap out of me. I wouldn't get in one again. They're frightening, big engines. It's ridiculous. But tell me the driving styles that you've had to adapt to over the years, because mate, a stern drive, I guess, is a bit like an outboard, more like an outboard than an inboard. And you've done the outboard thing as well.
Yep.
Maybe touch on that also. So you're going from V-drives through to stern drives, back to V-drives, and then an outboard as well. And we'll finish off with that outboard. You can tell me a little bit about how that all came about.
Well, the V-drive at the higher end with the Everingham, with the foot override cav plates, you had manual adjustment. You would get your straight edges out and make sure the plate settings were either parallel or with the angles you wanted at static.
Yep.
And then basically you needed to get propellers and things to get enough bow lift to keep the bow well up.
Yep.
And then we used to set a fixed setting and then just have the override pedal on the left.
Yep.
To dab down, which would just, in short periods, just settle the boat.
Yeah.
And so I always felt you needed to keep the bow up.
Yeah.
Some issues would occur with boats because if you're running them too flat to the water and then you were turning with the plate and the boat too flat to the water, it'd wrong side onto the other side of the V.
Yep.
And so that's where a few incidents occurred over time.
There was something called the Everingham roll there for a while, wasn't there? Trevor Johnson, I think.
Yes, the few, it occurred. And look, my feeling to that was I used to fly the boat a bit more and then just through the corners use the foot override. And just you would feel the water pressure through the left pedal. And then, so try and keep the left-hand side of the boat down, which is always useful in a left-hander. And then just feather it or feather the cav through the corner. So my answer to that was, if you had the boat too flat on the water, that was where you got the issue of it wrong siding.
Yeah.
Now, it only ever did it to us a couple of times, probably in the Southern 80.
Yeah.
And how I compensated for it is you had to do what went against your instincts. When it went to the wrong side, you had to still keep the power on but just ease it a little. And obviously not jump on the cav plate because it'll make it worse. And then the bit you had to do was steer with it, not against it.
Yeah.
You had to just release the wheel a bit and let it finish what it was doing to pull it back up.
Yeah.
So if you had it too flat and you fought it with the wheel, I'm just speculating.
Yeah, I agree.
That's and the thing you had to do is respect the boat. Always, and yes, because they're a fantastic boat. But you just had to respect them.
Yeah.
And we also had a cut-out V in the middle of the cav plates at the back, which reduced the rooster tail and spray, and I think may have assisted a little bit. But look, we never did it, but it was probably more luck than good management.
Well, when I jumped into my first outboard, I got in, it was a Bullet. God love the Bullets, you know. I love my Bullets.
They're a great boat.
They are. They teach you to drive. When I first got in my first one, there's something wrong with this boat. It wants to wobble from side to side. I now know that's chine walking, and it's just something that a V-bottom boat does. When did you first experience that? It was probably in a stern drive boat, I'd imagine.
It was probably in the first Connolly, and it was just getting the feel for it. And once again, a bit of a theme, often it was too much boat in the water.
Yeah.
And so the more you had keel in the water, the more you would be subject to that. But it comes down to the old thing. Propeller selection, drive height.
Yeah.
It's the same with outboards. It's the same with stern drives.
Yeah.
So I always felt if you had trim to a point where it was not ridiculously high but clear, that was something where I learned with the chine walking that trimming it up was not radically, that did help that circumstance.
Yeah.
But once again, same old story. If you run the boat and you think it's not right, it's not right.
Yeah.
Go back.
Run with your instincts.
Go back and go through everything again and go propeller, drive height, trim. So don't just think you can drive through a problem. You can't.
Now, one thing I do love about your career, Lester, is that, you know, generally we have inboard guys and outboard guys. I'd call you an inboard guy, but there was a little period there where you went to the twin rig. Tell me about that.
Well, what happened was...
What did you call it? Did you give it a name?
No, I don't think we ever...
You didn't give it a name?
I don't think we ever named it. Actually, I think at Botany Bay we did when it had carburettors on it and it had a fire in it, and I think John Hardacre named it the Hindenburg. I think we wrote that on it. No, we had the Everingham at the time, and then Mercury were developing the first of the Nicocell blocks.
Yep.
And they were genuine 300 horsepower. The two engines we had at 7,000 RPM. Yep. So I'd been talking about looking at something like that. Roger Connolly was keen to build a 21 for it.
Yeah.
So we still had the Everingham, but we built the boat. Ian Tricker rigged it out.
Yep. The guru of
the guru,
twin rigs.
Yeah.
Did he have complete marine at that stage?
No, that was after that.
That was after that, yep.
And that was that was in a period in between that and TR.
Yeah.
And he built it for us and rigged it all out, and it had these Mercury engines on it, which Ken Clark from Mercury had organised.
Yep.
And it basically did what they said it would do.
Yep.
In other words, we ran it, but if you want to know the least confident I was first driving a boat for the first time, it was that one.
Yeah.
Because it was light.
Yeah.
They were...
And not that big lump of cast iron.
It would run the speed. It was an excellent boat.
Yeah.
But we did it to see what these engines were like, and they were very good. But it was like, do I want to keep campaigning that? And then in the end, we sold the boat to Don Banning, which it became Crowboats, right? Okay. And so look, I loved it, and once again, it was technology. Ian did a lot of development on it. Roger Connolly did. We all enjoyed doing the project.
Yeah.
And yes, I did get a handle on driving it. And it was a delightful boat. It was probably a bit ahead of its time.
Yep.
And it was just a magnificent combination. And basically what Mercury said those engines would do, they did do.
Well, mate, as a sport, I think you and I will both agree that it's about, we love our boats. You and I are the same in that department, but it's probably more about the places we go and the people that we hang out with. Just before we finish up today, and I have to thank you, you've been very generous with your time, and I know you're a very private guy, and you did say something to me the other day that you wouldn't normally do it, but you are because it was me. So
that is correct.
I really take that on board and appreciate that, Lester. But do you have? I'm going to throw the floor open, mate. Anyone you want to thank? I mean, there's people that you know, in any racing, ski racing, cars, whatever it is, there's people that you go through the journey with that things probably wouldn't have happened without. Is there anyone particular like that?
Well, look, first and foremost would be Malcolm Priest and Karen Pett at PFM, because I've known them for many years, and Malcolm has a passion for all the same things that I do, and development, and we can discuss all these things, and each project engenders from the one before.
Yep.
So even when we sell a boat, people wonder, he's always building them and then gets them going and then sells them. And it's because we enjoy the technology.
Yep.
And we work on the theory that we build it to the best of our ability, and we hope somebody else likes it as well. So that would be first and foremost. But look, over the years, you've had various boat builders that I've dealt with a lot. We had the Everingham era, the Roger Connolly era, Rod Bickerton with Force.
Speedmaster.
Yeah, Speedmaster. Yeah, and all that side of things, all the people involved with those have always been good with me and entertained all my foibles of 300 spreadsheets and this is how I want it and drawing it up, and then they usually go and do what they want to anyway. but they at least listen, and because of the passion.
Yeah.
So in that era, and then going back to probably when I was racing all the time, Russell Jones would stand out because he was that laconic. And look, that was in the era when we probably raced 18 or 19 times a year, mainly in Sydney and around the place. And so that era, when we were doing that, Russell was just... he would just get on with it and do it. And that brings to the other point, success and being at the top level. There's no substitute for racing. Yeah. When there's nothing around it. Like, I don't race all the time.
Yeah.
We probably race 6 or 8 times a year tops.
Yeah.
But the people like Greg Houston, Mark Cranny, and all through the years, you've got to do race 18, 19, 20 races a year because you keep honing what you're doing.
Skills, yeah.
So they would be... Mark Lewins was also a very clever, deep thinker.
Yep.
And, of course, when he and Mike were tragically killed on the Hawkesbury, that made a huge dent in our world, and we still think of them today. I've probably forgotten a lot of people, but the reality is we all work together through over the years, and that's, we just enjoy developing things and just keeping things going. And if we still want to go racing, hopefully it'll get going again.
Yes.
But
we should mention we are social distancing.
Yes, we certainly are. Yep. But look, the thing with ski racing is everybody's endeavours and life and work. Once we actually go away to go ski racing for the weekend, we don't actually think about much else for that period of time. Yeah. So I guess it's the passion for the gear, the equipment, and just going and doing what we do.
Going and doing it. And there's just one final one, which I meant to ask you earlier in the piece, but you answered so many of my questions without me even asking them, which has just been fantastic. It's been great. Probably the coolest name on a ski race boat that I've ever seen, other than Spinal Tap maybe, Moonshot. I love it. Where did it come from?
Well,
just sounds fast.
All my boats over the years, when we were at Eildon and sitting up till all hours of the night, looking up at the moon, everything, there was moonshine, moonshadow, moonlighter, right? And so all the boats have always been called Moon something.
Yep.
So what happened is when we started racing, I always loved a boat from Queensland called Buckshot.
Yes.
Which was Trevor Wellham. And it was a yellow Haynes Hunter with a blown engine, and Tony Longhurst used to ski behind it. And they used to have fun. Yeah. So I always loved that name.
Yep.
So basically when we got, I think it was the Everingham, because the Connolly... the second Connolly was Moonshot. So I liked that name, so I just put the two together, Moonshot.
Yep. Moonshot.
So that's where it came from.
Sounds fast, sounds awesome. Don't change it.
No, we won't.
Synonymous. Lester, thank you so much again. I know that you're quite a private guy, and this probably doesn't come... Although the way you've spoken today has been very natural and very laid back. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and certainly as much as the fans will enjoy listening to it.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, mate.
Wow, what a wonderful story, and thanks so much for joining us, Lester. On the rope, we do appreciate your time, and of course, a fantastic job done there by Bisho. I don't actually know Lester personally, but after listening to that podcast, I'm pretty sure we'll get on just fine, and I'm looking forward to meeting him somewhere down the track. Anyway, it is prize time giveaway, and it is over to Mick Kelly for the question.
Yeah, cheers, Lump. This week's question is, who did Lester tow at the 1990 World Championships up in Darwin?
Great question there, Mick. And if you do know the answer to that question, just head to our Facebook page and put it through our messenger. And I'm pretty sure that somebody will be in contact with you if you are the winner. And talking of Mick Kelly, I really hope you enjoyed that interview that he did with Ray Ball. It certainly shows what two guys can do when they're just having a beer and a chat. Very interesting, very interesting. Well done, Mick. And we couldn't do it without our great sponsors in Savage Force merchandise, Bullet Boats, Rubber Jungle, Bad Lad Australia, and of course, Coldies, Tow Bars and Bull Bars. It is a time for us to go, and on behalf of the crew, which is obviously Chelsea Stevens, Mick Kelly, Jack Coldrake, Tim Horbury, Wade Bennett, Bisho, and myself, Lumpy. So until next time, you take care, and I'll see you on the water. Bye for now.
Audio production has been proudly produced by Mal's Media in association with our On the Rope podcast sponsors, Coldies, Tow Bars and Bull Bars, Mark Savage Merchandise, Bullet Boats, Rubber Jungle Wetsuits, TJH Coaching and Consulting, Rapid Concepts, Sven Productions, Bad Lad Australia and Bisho Media.